All right, so let's look at Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is all about mediated interpersonal communication. What we're going to do in the first section, which is the biggest section, we're going to look at what mediated communication is and take a look at the pros and cons. The second section, we're going to distinguish a little bit more between mediated interpersonal communication and mass personal communication. And then we're going to end with, similarly to Chapter 1, we're going to end with competence in not interpersonal, but in mediated communication. So the first section, we are going to identify the benefits and the drawbacks of mediated communication. Do you remember how in Chapter 1 there was an arrow that looked at impersonal and interpersonal communication, and I said it's not an either or, it's on a continuum? I dare say what we're going to be looking at into the pros and cons of mediated communication, it really is, again, a continuum. Okay, so let's make sure we're clear on the terms that we're using. Mediated communication is any communication that occurs with technology. Email, texting, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, LinkedIn, what are those? The Tinder, all of those kinds of sites are examples of mediated communication. But not all mediated communication uses social media. So email and texting, while they use technology, they use the internet, they don't actually use social media. It's the things like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook that uses social media. And here's where I have to say, in theory, I understand social media. In practice, I basically stopped using it a while ago. I haven't checked my Facebook page in years. So you guys are going to have to be the experts, or I can go over the theory and you will tell me about the actual practice. Okay, so what do you think? Is mediated communication a source of alienation or connection? Another way of saying that is, does mediated communication create social distance, or does it bring people together? And of course, the answer is going to be, it depends. But let's look first at some of the factors that can make mediated communication alienating. Okay, it can cause health issues. So basically what happens, I thought this was interesting. A comprehensive review showed that people lacking social connections are at a 29% higher risk for premature mortality. Okay, so if you don't have a lot of social connections, you're more apt to die earlier. And what happens is people who use mediated communication as a substitution for face-to-face interactions seem to suffer more than people who use it as a way of supplementing or augmenting their face-to-face interactions. So if all you have are interactions with people via technology, your health will suffer. And it can become a vicious cycle of alienation. This is a little bit, what came first, the chicken or the egg? The idea says that if you are a person who prefers to interact online, you might have a tendency to withdraw from face-to-face interactions, which makes you feel more isolated, which will cause you to interact more with people online, which will cause you to withdraw from more face-to-face interactions, which will make you feel more alienated, and so on. It doesn't have to be a vicious cycle of alienation, but it frequently is. So that's something to think about. Oh, and the authors really like this cartoon Zits. So you'll see a bunch of the cartoons as we go through this. Okay, I'm going to ask you, I'm not going to play it, but I'm going to ask you, I've put up the link to this video called I Forgot My Phone. I want you to look at it and see how the woman in the kind of yellow shirt who's got the really lovely cup of coffee, large cup of coffee, who does not have a cell phone, how does she feel surrounded by people who are constantly on their phones? Okay. Mediated communication can be a source of connection because it can enhance relationships. Especially think about how you interacted with people during our, what we're calling it, that wasn't shelter in place, but whatever it was during COVID when many of us weren't going out much. The fact that you could still connect with people via mediated communication probably enhanced the relationship, kept it going. Mostly it's excuse me, it's useful when it's, as I said last slide, when it supplements rather than replaces face-to-face interactions. For people who are a little bit hesitant about making new relationships, meeting somebody in an online environment can make it easier to start a new relationship. I thought this was, wait, where is it? I don't have it. Couples who met online stay together about as much as those who meet in person. Okay. And those who stay together transition to marriage more quickly and on average report happier marriages. I thought that was really interesting. They didn't actually mention, yes, they do, the study. I got to look at that study. And so that can help to sustain connections in romantic relationships. Okay, and this cartoon, I don't know if any of you as children knew the book Goodnight Moon, where the little rabbit is in bed and saying goodbye to all of the things in the in the room. And so this is the modern take. Oh, I forgot about Reddit. The modern take on Goodnight Moon. It's good night to all social media. Okay, so let me back up. So what do you think? Is is mediated communication more alienating or more connecting? Okay, we'll talk about that in class. Now let's look at, is mediated communication superficial or meaningful? And I don't know the answer to this one, so I really need your help. Are relationships that are created or sustained only via social media necessarily superficial? Well, the superficiality comes in, I think, in the number of friends. And I like the way they put the word friends in quotation marks. I'm going to guess that when you were maybe in middle school, the big thing was to get as many friends as possible. And you were accepting friend requests from people that you didn't even know. They were like a friend of a friend of a friend, kind of. Okay. So interesting concept, and we will come back to this idea. Chapter 10 and 11, I think. There's a concept called Dunbar's number that was based on work done by, I think his name was Robin Dunbar, who he's is an anthropologist, and in his studies he found that most people can sustain up to 150 relationships. For me, that blows my mind. I can't even imagine that. But what they say is, think about it as 5 people who are close to you, and then 10 people who are in a, you go out one layer, maybe 10 to 15 friends, close friends, and then you go out to 35 reasonably strong contacts, and then maybe 100 people who you have some connection with. But if you have 400,000 followers on Twitter, they are definitely not your friends. So it can seem superficial. And one of the things that we know is that meeting people in a face-to-face environment allows for a richer connection. In part, when we're talking about mediated communication, richness refers to all of the nonverbals, how close you stand to somebody. Are you looking in the person's eyes when you speak to them? Are you smiling? I mean, that's not the only meaning here, but it is in some ways challenging to have a really rich connection with people if your only interactions are online. Okay. However, mediated communication can be very meaningful if you have found people who share an interest with you. You connect. You're part of some kind of an online group of people who are Manchester United fans, or who like creating scrapbooks out of weird materials. I used to be part of one of those groups. Definitely one of the things that makes mediated communication meaningful, or that helps the meaningfulness, is that it definitely strengthens existing relationships. And I like the term that, excuse me, they call it media multiplexity. I wanted to find that. Okay, the theory asserts that people enhance their close relationships by using a greater number of channels. The stronger the bond, the more mediated channels you'll likely use in a relationship. Okay, I think it says likely, it doesn't say always. Okay, so you have a face-to-face. You're also texting with someone, and you Snapchat with them, and you share Instagram, and etc. Another way that mediated communication is meaningful is it helps you build social capital, access to people and resources that can enable social success. And what do they say? It's not what you know, it's who you know. This helps you know more people, right? And one of the things that you can create is something that they call a weak tie. Now, the stronger ties are the ties to the people who are truly friends. As my sister said, the people who, if they called you at midnight and said, please come to New Haven with 20 pounds of bananas, you would go to the store, buy it, and go there. That's a strong tie. A weak tie are people that you kind of sort of know. They're less personal relationships. You don't communicate with them very much. But the fact that you have them can help you be less lonely. So those are the four of the aspects that can make mediated communication meaningful. Now let's look at the third aspect. Is it healthy or is it unhealthy? Here, this is a big one. Some critics say that communication technology is unhealthy. Others say it can improve health. What do you say? And I'm sure, as I said before, you're going to say it depends. Well, obviously, what does it depend on? So let's look at this. Okay, let's look at the health aspects. Obviously, it helps us develop connections to other people. And for me, it helps us maintain connections. My daughter moved to New York City in the early-ish stages of the pandemic, so she hasn't been back to visit very much. And just, being able to text her or to FaceTime with her or to use WhatsApp, but whatever, just to be able to connect so that I know that she's okay and that I can see her new apartment and see how the cat is doing, that helps decrease my stress. Okay. It also helps us because it creates social support. There's a great story about a man who used mediated communication when he was dealing with alcoholism, and all the people reaching out to him helped him. What does he say? Social media, AA keeps me sane, but social media got me there. Without that far-reaching network of people, friends and strangers alike, I wouldn't be here today. Right? So that's a very important concept. And then feedback on a variety of topics. So you have a question. You can post a question and get some nonsense and also get some great feedback. Okay. Unhealthy. This cartoon cracks me up. If you've ever had a dog who had to wear that collar. So there's the guy at the party with that collar, and he's to keep him from looking at his phone every 2 seconds. Okay. So how can mediated communication be unhealthy? A lot of people spend so much time in mediated communication that they're not getting enough sleep. Let me just check my phone one time before I go to bed, or you wake up in the middle of the night and you reach for your phone first thing. It definitely can cause depression. It can impact, let's not say cause, it can impact depression, loneliness, and social anxiety. There's a link between heavy reliance on mediated communication and depression, loneliness, and social anxiety. This appears especially true for teenage girls. We're going to talk about that in a second. It can also diminish your self-esteem. When you think about a lot of the... I was going to turn on the fan, but I unplugged it. A lot of people who go on social media, what you see is people posting pictures from their highlight reel, right? How beautiful their house is, how wonderful their makeup is, how great their diet is going, how physically fit they are. And they're not showing the days that they wake up and they put on their baggy sweatpants and they don't even take a shower, and we don't see that. And so it can distort our perception of reality by thinking that their life is perfect and my life is crappy. And it can overall lead to a lack of well-being. And let me see. Yes. Okay. Please pay particular attention to the dark side of communication text box on page 37 to look at both what effects do smartphones have on teens, based mostly on the work of Jean Twenge. And after you read it, I want you to think about, do you think that smartphones cause loneliness and depression? Or do you think that lonely and depressed teens use their smartphones more, and then it becomes, again, this self-fulfilling prophecy, this vicious cycle, as they say? Okay. So, pros and cons, overall, what is the bottom line with social, I keep saying social media, mediated communication? Okay. Well, it's a fact of life. I don't think we can escape from it. So there are 3 things to keep in mind. Moderation in all things. It's not good to have an all or nothing approach to mediated communication. Use it, don't let it consume your life. I thought this was fascinating, the active versus passive use. So people who are passive users, who go online and see what other people are posting but don't engage, they tend to be more negatively impacted than people who go on, maybe look at what people are posting and then create their own posts, or whatever the platform is that you're using, whatever the term is. Okay. And I think when you are more active, you have more of a sense of agency. You feel that you are more in control. And then the last idea is the known versus unknown communicators. If you are more apt to find mediated communication helpful and healthy and not superficial, if you're communicating with people that you know offline. I'm not saying you only can communicate with them, but if all of your communications are only with people that you know via, they're on the other side of your phone, it's going to negatively impact you. All right. So, what do you think? Are the ill effects from media channels as great as some critics have thought, or are they not as great as some critics have thought? This is what I would really like to discuss in class, because as I have said, I don't have firsthand knowledge of this. I've only seen a little bit how it impacts others. The last idea I want to leave you with is the idea of a social media detox. Have you ever done this? Like, what is the longest period of time you have gone without using social media? Okay, if you actually did a detox, where they talked about, oh gosh, how long did they do? 7 days. Can you go 7 days? All right. So if you did this detox, how did it go? Was it helpful? If you haven't done it, how long do you think you could last before you started to feel withdrawal symptoms? You started to be anxious. You started to be irritable. All right. All great stuff that we will talk about when we get to this chapter. And I need to